Judy Garland, the enchanting star of The Wizard of Oz, once had the world at her feet. Her voice captivated millions, and her performances were legendary. But behind the dazzling lights of Hollywood, her life was a haunting tragedy. From childhood, she was subjected to brutal studio pressures, fed amphetamines to stay energetic and sleeping pills to rest. The result? A lifelong battle with addiction. Despite her immense talent, Garland was financially exploited. Multiple divorces, bad investments, and a parasitic industry drained her wealth. By the 1960s, she was struggling to make ends meet, performing in nightclubs just to pay rent. The MGM darling, who once walked the red carpet, was now begging friends for loans. On June 22, 1969, Garland was found dead in her London apartment, overdosed on barbiturates. She was only 47, a Hollywood legend reduced to a life of financial ruin and loneliness. Her funeral saw thousands mourning, but the industry that once adored her had long abandoned her. Judy Garland's story is a chilling reminder of how fame can be a double-edged sword, offering glory while silently destroying those it embraces. Errol Flynn, the dashing rogue of Hollywood, was the epitome of adventure and charm. His roles in The Adventures of Robin Hood and Captain Blood made him a global sensation. Women adored him, men envied him, and studios profited immensely from his charisma. But beneath the surface, Flynn was a man spiraling towards destruction. He lived life in excess, booze, women, and reckless spending defined his days. He burned through his fortune as quickly as he made it, indulging in extravagant yachts, exotic travels, and endless parties. As he aged, Hollywood's love for him faded. His drinking worsened, and the once golden star became a shadow of his former self. By the late 1950s, Flynn was broke, sick, and desperate. He was forced to sell his beloved yacht and take minor roles just to survive. In 1959, at just 50 years old, his hard-living lifestyle caught up with him. He suffered a fatal heart attack in a cheap Vancouver apartment, his body aged beyond its years. The world remembered Errol Flynn as a legend, but his final days were a painful testament to the price of excess and Hollywood's fleeting loyalty. Barbara Payton had the beauty, talent, and charm to become one of Hollywood's brightest stars. In the early 1950s, she was on the verge of superstardom, starring alongside legends like Gregory Peck and James Cagney. But beneath her glamorous exterior, chaos brewed. Her reckless lifestyle, toxic relationships, and self-destructive choices led her down a tragic path. Payton became infamous for her stormy love affairs, most notably a violent love triangle between actors Frank Tone and Tom Neal. Her career suffered as studios distanced themselves from her scandalous reputation. As the roles disappeared, so did her money. She turned to alcohol and self-destruction, spending her final years drifting between cheap motels, arrested for public intoxication, and struggling to survive. By the time she was in her 40s, she was homeless and rumored to be working as a prostitute to afford liquor. In 1967, Barbara Payton died at just 39, her body ravaged by years of addiction and hardship. Once Hollywood's promising starlet, she became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how fame, when mixed with recklessness, can turn a dream into a nightmare. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was once Hollywood's highest-paid comedian, a beloved silent film star whose slapstick humor had audiences roaring with laughter. He lived in luxury, enjoying wealth and fame that few could imagine. But in 1921, everything changed. A wild party in a San Francisco hotel led to accusations that would destroy him forever. Arbuckle was charged with the rape and manslaughter of aspiring actress Virginia Rappe, a crime he swore he never committed. Though he was acquitted after 3 trials, the damage was irreversible. Hollywood blacklisted him, his films were banned, and his fortune crumbled. The man who once reigned over comedy was now a pariah, struggling to find work under fake names just to make a living. Years later, he attempted a comeback, signing a film deal in 1933. But fate had one final cruel twist. On the very night he celebrated his return, he suffered a fatal heart attack at just 46 years old. Fatty Arbuckle died broke and disgraced, a tragic reminder of how quickly Hollywood can turn its back on those it once worshipped. Dorothy Dandridge was a vision of beauty and talent, the first black actress nominated for a Best Actress Oscar for Carmen Jones, 1954. She broke racial barriers in Hollywood, proving that black women could be leading ladies. But despite her groundbreaking success, the industry never fully embraced her. While white actresses soared, Dandridge was offered limited, stereotypical roles, or nothing at all. Financial struggles soon followed. A string of failed relationships, bad business decisions, and legal troubles drained her wealth. Her former manager mismanaged her finances, leaving her in debt to the IRS. At one point, she was so broke she couldn't even afford a hospital stay for her disabled daughter. The star who once graced red carpets found herself living in near poverty, battling depression and addiction to antidepressants. On September 8, 1965, Dorothy Dandridge was found dead in her small apartment, likely from an overdose. She was only 42. Her legacy as a pioneer was nearly erased by history, but in time, Hollywood remembered her as the icon she truly was. Her tragic downfall remains a haunting example of how talent alone is never enough in an industry built on discrimination and fleeting fame. Bela Lugosi, the Hungarian actor who immortalized Dracula, 1931, became synonymous with the role. His chilling voice, hypnotic stare, and theatrical presence made him a horror icon. But while the character granted him eternal fame, it also became his curse. Hollywood typecast him, refusing to see him as anything beyond a vampire. As roles dwindled, so did his fortune. By the 1940s, Lugosi was struggling, forced to take low-budget horror roles just to survive. His declining career, combined with chronic pain, led to a morphine addiction. His financial situation worsened, and at one point, he was so broke he applied for welfare. His final years were marked by desperation, working on cheap, forgettable films like Plan 9 from Outer Space, 1957, which became infamous for its poor quality. On August 16, 1956, Lugosi died of a heart attack in a small Los Angeles apartment, penniless and forgotten by the industry he helped build. In a fitting yet tragic twist, he was buried in his Dracula cape. Bela Lugosi, the man who once commanded the silver screen, spent his last days as a relic of a Hollywood that had long moved on. Veronica Lake, with her iconic blonde peekaboo hairstyle, was one of the most alluring stars of the 1940s. She dazzled in noir classics like This Gun for Hire and The Blue Dahlia, capturing the hearts of millions. But behind the camera, Lake was plagued by personal demons. Her career, like her life, unraveled in a storm of alcoholism, failed marriages, and financial ruin. Her difficult attitude on set alienated directors and co-stars, and as Hollywood shifted, her fame quickly faded. By the 1950s, the offers had dried up, and her money was gone. She spiraled into heavy drinking, which only worsened her situation. Struggling to survive, she abandoned Hollywood altogether. In a shocking twist, by the 1960s, the once glamorous star was working as a waitress in a cheap hotel bar in New York, serving drinks to customers who had no idea they were being waited on by a former silver screen siren. Lake died of hepatitis and kidney failure in 1973 at just 50 years old. A Hollywood goddess reduced to obscurity, she became a cautionary tale, proof that fame can disappear as quickly as it arrives, leaving behind nothing but faded memories and shattered dreams. Marie Prevost was once a shining star of silent cinema, known for her beauty, charm, and comedic timing. She captivated audiences in the 1920s, starring in films like The Marriage Circle and Kiss Me Again. But as Hollywood transitioned to talkies, her career crumbled. Her once coveted voice didn't match the industry's new demands, and the roles disappeared overnight. Struggling with rejection, Prevost turned to alcohol to numb the pain. Her finances deteriorated, and she fell into deep depression. By the 1930s, the glamorous actress who once graced the silver screen was living in near poverty, taking bit parts just to afford food. In a tragic and macabre twist, in January 1937, she was found dead in her small Los Angeles apartment, malnourished and alone. Reports claimed her beloved dachshund had tried to wake her, nibbling at her body in desperation. Marie Prevost's heartbreaking downfall serves as a haunting reminder of Hollywood's brutal indifference. A star who once had it all was discarded and forgotten, proving that in show business, fame is fleeting and survival is never guaranteed. Buster Keaton, the legendary comedian and stunt master of silent cinema, was once one of Hollywood's biggest stars. His deadpan expression and daring physical comedy made films like The General and Sherlock Jr. masterpieces. But while audiences adored him, Keaton's story was far from a laughing matter. At the height of his fame, Keaton lost creative control when he signed with MGM, a decision he called the worst of his life. The studio stifled his genius, forcing him into formulaic comedies that stripped away his artistic freedom. As sound films took over, his career declined, and his personal life crumbled. Alcohol became his escape, costing him his fortune and his marriage. By the 1930s, the once revered silent star was broke and forgotten, reduced to working as an uncredited gag writer for other comedians just to survive. In his later years, Keaton experienced a small career revival, but Hollywood never fully repaid him for his contributions. He died in 1966, having lived long enough to see his work rediscovered, yet never receiving the wealth or respect he truly deserved. Buster Keaton, the man who made the world laugh, spent his darkest years in heartbreaking obscurity. Mabel Normand was more than just a silent film star. She was a trailblazer. A gifted comedienne and director, she worked alongside legends like Charlie Chaplin and Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle, charming audiences with her mischievous wit. But behind the laughter, Normand's life was a whirlwind of scandal, addiction, and tragedy. Her career took a devastating hit when she became entangled in Hollywood's darkest controversies. She was close to director William Desmond Taylor, whose unsolved murder in 1922 cast a shadow over her reputation. Though never a suspect, her association with the crime damaged her career. Adding to her troubles, her name surfaced in another scandal when her chauffeur was involved in a shooting. Struggling with declining roles and a spiraling drug addiction, Normand's health began to fail. By the late 1920s, tuberculosis had ravaged her body. She spent her final years in seclusion, far from the Hollywood limelight she once ruled. In 1930, at just 37, Mabel Normand died penniless and forgotten. The woman who helped shape silent comedy was erased from history, another victim of an industry that discards its fallen stars without a second thought. Terry Thomas, with his signature gap-toothed grin and impeccable comic timing, was one of Britain's most beloved actors. He charmed audiences in films like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World and Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines, playing the ultimate English cad, witty, dapper, and delightfully roguish. But behind the laughter, his own life took a tragic turn. In the 1970s, at the height of his success, Terry Thomas was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. The illness slowly stole his ability to perform, and with no steady income, his once lavish lifestyle crumbled. Medical bills drained his savings, forcing him to sell his beloved home and belongings. By the 1980s, the man who once graced the biggest stages was living in near poverty, struggling to afford basic care. In a heartbreaking final chapter, a fundraiser organized by his old colleagues helped provide him with a dignified retirement home. But the vibrant entertainer was now a shadow of himself, confined by illness. Terry Thomas passed away in 1990 at 78, not as the celebrated actor he once was, but as a tragic reminder of how quickly fortune can fade, even for the most talented stars. Bud Abbott, one half of the legendary comedy duo Abbott and Costello, was a master of timing and wit. With his straight-man delivery, he perfectly balanced Lou Costello's wild antics in classics like Buck Privates and Who's on First, making millions laugh during Hollywood's golden age. Yet despite his massive success, Abbott's later years were marked by financial ruin and heartbreak. Though Abbott and Costello were among the highest-paid entertainers of their time, poor financial management and hefty IRS debts drained their fortunes. Costello's death in 1959 left Abbott without his longtime partner, and his attempts to return to entertainment, like voicing an animated Abbott and Costello series, failed to restore his wealth. Struggling with debt and declining health, he was forced to sell his home and rely on Social Security. In his final years, Abbott battled seizures and cancer, living quietly with little recognition for his contributions to comedy. He died nearly penniless in 1974 at 78, his legacy overshadowed by the financial hardships he endured. The man who once made the world laugh spent his last days in quiet struggle, a tragic end for a comedy icon.